There's not a student in the world that I have ever met that wakes up every day and is like, I'm going to go to school and do my worst. So I think first and foremost is understanding like our kids are walking in and they're doing the best that they can in that moment. Like my best on a Monday may look different from my best on a Tuesday, but understanding that A, they're all trying to do their best. But then B is every behavior that any person has is communicating something. So I think when you separate that behavior from the person and really try to understand what are our students trying to communicate with their behaviors, when you look at behavior as a communication versus an act, it allows you to try to understand that behavior a little better. Oftentimes, students that are misbehaving are either trying to get something or get out of something.
Welcome to the Mindset on Resilience podcast. I am your host, Daniel Truelove, and I am excited for the guest that we have for you all today. As you already know, we're here to build a more resilient, confident, and mentally strong community. And the guest that we have is going to do just that. And he's super dynamic, and I'm just honored that we have this opportunity to have this conversation. He is the president of Teachers Ed. More so than that, let me hold on before I say it, let me hold on. Let me rewind. I apologize. He's a husband. Okay, let me get my priorities right. Father, and then from there, he is the president of Teachers Ed. He's a world-renowned speaker. He is the executive director of Greater Holy Temple Christian Academy. I think I got that right. Greater Holy Temple Christian Academy, award-winning executive director at that. And so he's been honored for a lot of the work that he's doing as an educator, as an impact leader across the world. And I'm excited that I get the opportunity for us to have a conversation with Mr. Edward DeShazer. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. I'm good. I appreciate you. You got the school name right. It's a mouthful, but I appreciate you having me on and connecting with me.
Good, good. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I was before that, like Greater Holy Temple Christian Academy. I said, make sure I get, make sure I get that right.
Yeah, you got to gather yourself and get the words right.
I had to come correct. I started talking about the personal accolades, and I was like, wait a minute, let me make sure I honor you because I know your family is important to you, and see you talk about your family a lot. So I want to make sure I gave the honor and put what's first. And so, man, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to connecting and just being able to pour into the people listening on your platform.
Good, good. So I want to start here, man, because our audience is one to where it's an educator audience, and man, your story is one that I think that everyone, not just educators, that needs to hear when it comes to hope and transformation. Um, from the very beginning, like from you 30 times being suspended from school. I think you said alternative school 3 times, and expelled from school 3 times. Former special education student. Walk me through like what was going on in your life while all this was happening.
Yeah, I mean, just at an early age, I was always someone that was fairly intelligent, but I just struggled with the systems and structures that schools would place on me. As a young kid, I felt teachers kind of boxed me in. Once in third grade, when I was labeled a special education student, I was given with the category emotionally disturbed. Really, at that point, it was like part of it was teachers and educators would justify my bad behaviors because that was the box they put me in. Like, oh, he's just a special ed student. Like that is what was expected. So early on, I feel like in third grade, I got placed in that box, and it's kind of where I operated. And I justify my own behaviors with that. Like, oh, I'm special ed. I should be disrupting your class. I should be, cussing you out. I should be, just being defiant and disrespectful. And then, really, in high school, I ran into some educators. There was specifically a English teacher, Miss Davis. Shout out to Miss Davis. That she ultimately, like, I say that she changed my life because she was one of the first educators that I can remember as a freshman in high school who did not allow the labels of being a student in special education. She didn't allow my IEP. She didn't allow what the other teachers shared with her about me to dictate how she treated me. Um, and that showed me a lot. It was one of the first times where I like truly felt an educator cared about me. And that ultimately gave me a different mindset on school. And then there was some changes that I had to make as a student. I started to make those, and then I started to find like success academically. I started to find success in sports. I started surrounding myself with different friends, which was critical for me. And then ultimately, that was like a turning point where I was like, okay, I can like do this school thing. Granted, it was sophomore year of high school. I was a little late to the game, but it she planted a seed that was able to grow really fast for me.
So what about the family dynamic? Like you said, like third grade, diagnosed with an IEP, and emotionally disturbed. Was there a connection between what was going on in school, between like what was going on outside of school?
Yeah, not at all. And I always, when I get a chance to share with educators, we tend to make these judgments based on the household a student comes from. A student doesn't have a dad, they're going to have problems. A student comes from a lower income background, they're going to have problems. And like, is the likelihood higher? I'm sure, the statistics show that there's a higher likelihood, but to just say that because you see students that you see it on the news all the time. A kid gets in trouble and like, where are the parents? Like, I was a kid that had a lot of problems, but I had two incredible parents. They both were hardworking. They both were present in my life. They both showed up to conferences. They both, when a teacher called, answer the phone. Like, they're not the ones that like the teacher, they see the school call him, they're like, let me. I guess that was before we had caller ID. I'm old enough, so they didn't have a choice. You answer the phone, you're gonna find out who was there. um, but like all the statistics and check boxes that people in education always look for to justify why a kid may have troubles, like I didn't check those boxes. Like I came from a middle class family, parents working multiple jobs, hardworking, went to a pretty well off school district. Um, so it's like I didn't have struggles at home. My parents were super supportive. Like they were there, they were there for me. If I needed help, someone was there. If I had a like I didn't have any problems. My problems were specific to school.
And I'm glad you made that distinction because I too come from two parent house, had some challenges in school, and a lot of times when I go and speak, that's one of the main distinctions that I make because it's like, oh, they're quick to ask questions. Where's your dad? Where's your mom? And so I was the youngest of 11 kids, and so we did have the socioeconomic economic aspects going on, but family support, as far as like the values that they were instilling with us, didn't match what was going on while I was at school. It was more so trauma for me from losing three of my siblings by the time I was 14, and so I'm grateful that like you shared that, hey, my family dynamic and that structure was great. This was a school thing, because it's easy to shift the blame away from an environment that you have no control over. And so, what was third grade? Emotionally disturbed, and you talked about that label that was placed on you, and that label carried with you until you met Miss Davis, an educator who didn't allow you to stay within that. Tell me a little bit about like what did Miss Davis do? Like, is there anything specifically that you remember that like she did that was super impactful to the change that you end up making within your life?
Yeah, so there's twofold. One of the first, I was a student that was very good at testing my teachers because it was like, I was trying to draw. I'm testing to see who you are and what you're about as an educator. Like that was one thing I was good at. So early on, as a freshman, I remember testing her in her classroom. Um, and at the time I was a, 15-year-old black kid from Milwaukee in a suburban school, and she's, probably early 60s white woman from a suburb. So to me, it's like, again, not someone that looks like me. So let me see what she's about. And I tested her, and I remember vividly the conversation. She calls me into the hallway and she was like, go in the hallway, let's talk. And at that point, with any other teacher, so our high school had this like long, it had wings, and we had it was called the B wing. The B wing was where all the special education classes were. This was before inclusive environments were even discussed, because it was like they would send you and you would walk down this long hallway, all the glass windows, so everyone could see you walking. And she called me in the hallway, and I was really expecting her to do what every other educator did, where it's like, Eddie, or go to Miss Rice, who was my special ed teacher, go down there and then basically just send the problem to the special ed wing of the building. And she called me in the hallway and she was like, you are special. And I was waiting for her to say special ed and send me away. And she was like, you are special. Like, let's get it together. Like, you are not going to do this in my classroom. Like, let's go back in the class. Let's handle our business. And it was one of the first times where it was like someone didn't see eh, she didn't see my challenges. She separated me from my challenges. I may have had challenging behaviors, but I wasn't the challenge. My behaviors were. And I think her seeing that and separating the doer from the deed was important, because then it just allowed me to realize, like, man, I like someone believes in me, because I was one of those kids. I knew both my parents were working. So if I got suspended and I was at home, bro, I was the best at Madden. Like, I would go home, I'll get a whole season done during a suspension. So some of my behaviors were because I didn't like school, I didn't like my teachers. So let me be suspended. I can go home and sit by myself all day. I can breeze through the work. They give you the packets of work, fly through those in an hour. And now I got 2.5 days left to do whatever I want at home, watch TV. And so that was like really one of the biggest moments, was just that aspect. But then not long after that, I ended up getting expelled from that same high school. And come to find out after the fact, Miss Davis was someone that went to the superintendent and the principal and was like, "This, there's something special in this kid. Like, let him come back." So she was someone that only had me in her class for, under a month, and she was a champion for me to come back to school. Like, she went out on a limb where oftentimes, an educator sees a student that has challenges, and they wipe their hands like, "Whew, this year is going to be a lot easier." And I totally get it, because I've been in education where kids can really make your classroom a difficult place to work. And she went and fought for me to come back. So ultimately, when I came back as a sophomore, she wasn't even my teacher when I came back again until I was a senior in high school. But the fact that she saw something special in me and went out of her way, she didn't have to, she didn't know me, she knew me for a month. So she didn't really know me, but there was something inside of me that she saw for her to want to go in front of the board and the leadership and be like, I would fight for this kid to come back. So little things like that that you find out after the fact just mean the world, to me, to why, had she not done that and they didn't allow me to come back, I mean, I was in a treatment facility. A lot of the friends I was hanging out with doing drugs, a lot of them are either dead from drug use, some are in jail. And I probably would not, well, not probably, I wouldn't have done what I did, because when I went back after that as a sophomore, I started playing football and ended up with an academic and athletic scholarship when I left high school to play football in college. So it's like, had I not went back, who knows what would have happened to me.
Oh wow! So I want to highlight something that you mentioned there because I think it's really important for us to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. And it was that you said about challenging behaviors, and one of the things that I've heard, and it was one of the most enlightening things that I probably have heard to this day, is that students don't have challenging behaviors. They have behaviors that challenge adults. And so there is a one individual, an adult, that can have that same student with the challenging behaviors, and it's not a problem for them. And so to the other person, rewind back to third grade. You did something that challenged them. They labeled you, right? Emotionally disturbed. And that label carried with you for a long period of time until you met someone that no longer saw you as the ed part of it, but just special. And I would love for you to elaborate on that a little bit more about, challenges. Students don't have challenging behaviors, but they have behaviors that challenge adults. Do you agree with that, or what is your perspective on that? Because I know you have the consultant side perspective, but also the lived experience and also the educated experience as well.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I really encourage educators is to First of all, we have to understand that when our students walk into our building, there's not a student in the world that I have ever met that wakes up every day and is like, "I'm gonna go to school and do my worst." So I think first and foremost is understanding like our kids are walking in and they're doing the best that they can in that moment. Like my best on a Monday may look different from my best on a Tuesday, but understanding that A, they're all trying to do their best. But then B is every behavior that any person has is communicating something. So I think when you separate that behavior from the person and really try to understand what are our students trying to communicate with their behaviors, when you look at behavior as a communication versus an act, it allows you to try to understand that behavior a little better. Oftentimes, students that are misbehaving are either trying to get something or get out of something, whether it's get attention, get whatever, or they're trying to, like, a student can't read and you ask them to raise their hand and now they got to be embarrassed in front of their classmates. More often than not, they're going to have an outburst because I know that I will get sent out of class and now I don't have to be embarrassed in front of my classmates. So the biggest thing for me is just getting people to understand A, separating the doer from the deed. Like, I can be disappointed in Daniel's behavior, but it doesn't mean I have to be disappointed in Daniel. Like, you are not your behavior. Your behavior is a communication that you are using to communicate something. And a lot of times those kids don't know what they're trying to communicate. It's just their instinct, the fight or flight. So getting educators to separate the doer from the deed, but then trying to identify what are those behaviors communicating. Like if a kid is hungry and tired, a kid stayed up all night, they're going to come in and probably have a pretty rough day. And there's no other rhyme or reason other than they're tired. So I think that's like one of the bigger factors. And Ms. Davis was one of the first people that really looked at my behaviors and pulled me out of the behavior. Like the behavior was not who I was. It was something I did. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is we classify people because of their behaviors instead of classifying them as a person and the behavior is what they were communicating.
Nah, I think that's really good, but I think there's a larger conversation that needs to happen when it comes to you've mentioned labels, but like the behavior that comes like with the label, or the behavior that comes like with the identity. And so if I identify as someone that is emotionally disturbed, as someone that's the bad kid, you can't expect to get anything from me except for what I know myself to be. And so how do we get students, how do we get just larger scale, just individuals to like identify with something better, to identify with something greater, identify with something different in order for them to now have behaviors that match the environment or whatever is the standard or the norm, whatever the case may be, for that is. But the base level is that we have to recognize that everybody's doing their best. Like when you said that, very profound, because if we don't have the presupposition that okay, whatever this student is, whatever their best is, they just gave that to me, but yet we say, oh, that's not their best. Their best is this, so therefore they're this. Like we're doing ourselves, and we're also doing students a disservice because not understanding that ground level foundation that if they could do better, they would.
Yeah. And I think even taking it a step further, some of our teachers are just doing their best. Like we're dealing with stuff outside of work and you show up and the problem for teachers is they set such a high standard in a classroom that when they don't meet it, they beat themselves up. When their students don't meet it, they beat their students up. Like you're a B student. Well, imagine a B student, going through, their lights just got cut off a couple days before. They got to wake up and get their siblings ready. Their siblings are doing all these things, and they show up to school and they get a C that day, and you're sitting them down like Daniel, you're a B student. What is this? It's like, that day I was a C, and that's okay because that C was the best I could give you for that day. And I think just really getting people to understand like it's just a foundational thing. Like nobody wakes up like I'm gonna do my worst today. There's nobody I've ever heard that. Like we are all out here trying to do our best, and more so in the last 4 years with just the shift of what COVID has did to people mentally in education. It's our best may not be that good on some days, and that's not just our students, that's some of us as educators, some of us like myself as an executive director. Like I've went through things And I show up to work and my best, people are probably like, man, his best wasn't very good today. But if you just understand that that is the best I could give you today, then tomorrow's a new day. We try it again tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow's better, maybe it's not. But if the foundation of our belief in our students, and it all comes down to the belief, like, we're talking about mindset. Do you believe that your students are doing their best? Because if they are and they only get a C plus, I'm proud of you. You did your best today. Now let's see what your best looks like tomorrow. Same with our educators. Like, there's some days that the best is just getting your feet on the ground, out of the bed, and that's the best you're going to do. But then hopefully the next day your best, may look better to the people around you. But if the foundation is everyone's doing their best, I mean, you just got to stand on that. Like, this is the best they're doing. And that's all about the mindset of how we view our kids. Ms. Davis didn't view me as a special education student because the word, how we say it and the words we use matter. Ms. Davis viewed me as a special kid, in the school. And everyone else is like, he's special education. He's special education. It's like, is it a special education kid, or is it a kid that's in special education? Because there's a difference just by shifting those words right there alone of how we view our students. Because by my junior year, I wasn't in any special education classes anymore. I don't think that was a coincidence. It's not like my behaviors changed. It's just the school and the teachers understood how to work with my behaviors. You have a kid in your class that, like, I was a kid that was all over the place. I would get my work done and I would be antsy because I'm bored. Let me pass papers out. Let me collect papers. Give me a broom and be like, hey, when you're done, sweep up the class. Bro, I'll be the best sweeper in the classroom, but you got to keep me busy. If you give me downtime, I'm going to give you problems. And that's something, I'm 40 years old, and that's still a problem. That's why I don't give myself downtime. Like, bro, I gotta stay busy.
I feel you. Yeah, I feel you. That's good, man. And I love that that tool, that resource. Like, give those students, give them something to do. Like, keep them busy and keep them out of trouble, man. And one of the things that I love about your story is that there's this transformation. You mentioned no longer being in special education, being a exemplary student from an academic standpoint, getting an academic and athletic scholarship to go to college, and you not only have your bachelor's degree, but you have your master's degree. Um, what Tell me a little bit about Miss Davis. Was she able to see you graduate from, let's say, college or anything like that, and like, what did she say? Like, if you've had an opportunity to have conversation with her since then, like, what did she say about the special person that she sees today, but she saw it before anybody else see it? Like, what have those conversations been like?
Yeah, so Miss Davis, I've been out of high school. It's 23 years now, and I still talk to Miss Davis all the time. She just celebrated her 77th birthday a couple weeks ago. Um, she saw me graduate. I made a point. I went to school in Minnesota, and every time I came back to Milwaukee, I made a point to come visit her and just show up and let her know I appreciated her and the work that she did, because she was just an awesome person in general. I started a scholarship at my high school in 2018 to give away to students that have faced adversity and overcome adversity at my high school. And every year I give out a $2,000 scholarship. And the first year I did it, I had Ms. Davis there, and I recognized her in this big room, because as educators, it's a very thankless job. A lot of times, like, you get a pat on the back, you get a pizza party, you get some free coffee, and it's like that's it for some of us. So it was important for me to really give her flowers, and she's someone that I love to highlight, because there's a Miss Davis in every school, several Miss Davis in every school, and they may not realize how impactful the work, because as educators sometimes we get caught in this trap. If you got 25 kids in your class, that you got to reach all 25, and I just don't think that's reasonable. Like, I think we have to be realistic. But I'm a perfect example of having 25 kids in a class, and maybe she didn't reach any of them, but she reached me. Like, now, because of what she did, I am a school leader. I do work in the community. I own other businesses. I travel and speak to teachers. But anytime I get an opportunity and a platform to present at a school, at a district, a keynote, like, there has not been one time that I've spoken in front of people and not mentioned Miss Davis. because she was someone that just had a massive impact on me. And I actually did a PD for the district I was expelled from 2 years ago, and I had Ms. Davis there, and she retired, and I just asked her to show up, and she showed up. And again, it's just about acknowledging the people who were there for me, and it was I was a difficult. The thing I would say is Ms. Davis gave me her best when I gave her my worst, and that's why she was so incredible. Like, she wasn't giving me her best because she wanted something in return. Like, I was giving her the worst, and she was like, despite all that, you still get the best, Miss Davis. And it's like, there's Miss Davises in schools all over the country. And my goal when I get out and speak in front of educators is just to give them belief. Like, educators love data. Like, I am the data of what happens when you don't give up on a kid that is giving you every reason in the world to give up. I'm cussing them out. I'm fighting. I'm, doing drugs, showing up to school high. Like, I've done all that, but they never gave up on me. And now look, now I get the opportunity to, it's the butterfly effect. Like, had they given up on me, I wouldn't be leading a school. I wouldn't be in front of educators doing the work that I'm doing. But I am living proof of what happens when, you really believe in the future of the kids that are in front of you on a daily basis. And Ms. Davis has just been such a big part, which is why, I can never get in front of teachers and not highlight her, because I know that there is a Miss Davis that probably listening to this podcast at the schools I'm going to, at these conferences, in the school that I lead. Like, there's a Miss Davis out there, and they just have to see that, that 14, 15-year-old may have a lot of struggles, but just know that one day that kid could be out in the world. They could be your coworker. They could be, Miss Davis and I, we talk via Facebook all the time. Anytime I post something, she's one of the first people on there congratulating me and celebrating me. And it's like, probably in her wildest dreams in 2000 or 1999, she wouldn't even have imagined I would be doing what I'm doing. But she saw potential and knew that there was something there that just had to be nurtured.
Wow, and that's awesome. I think that's amazing, and it's so many special moments because sometimes without that belief, or and sometimes it just takes time in order for us to really see that seed that was planted, to see it, growing and developing into what we saw the whole time. And I think it's amazing for those individuals that continue to not only plant but water and cultivate when they haven't even seen necessarily the impact of it yet. But then to actually see it, man, that's super special. And so, shout out to Miss Davis. Thank you so much for all the work that you did, in Edward's life, and all shout out to all the other Miss Davises out there that are doing tremendous work in their schools. And the fact I love that she made an impact on you, and you are now a school leader. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do at Greater Holy Temple Christian Academy.
Yeah, so I've been there. This is my 18th year. Started off as a seventh grade teacher. I love what I do. Seeing the kids come in every day. I've been the executive director now, going on, I think this is my eighth year. And when I got into that position, I went and got certified in restorative practices because I saw how schools, and I can't say schools treated me poorly. That's probably the wrong way to say it, but schools weren't set up for students like me. Let me say it that way. Schools treated me the way schools treat students, but it didn't work for who I was. So that was the first thing I did. I went and got certified in restorative practices. At the time, our school was one of the 10 worst ranked schools in the state of Wisconsin. Um, and within 5 years, we lowered our suspension rate by 80%, went from 1 star to 4 star. And my focus was just relationships. Because what I've learned is, if kids are loyal, like kids, and we know that because you see kids that have abusive parents, but they're loyal to them because of that relationship. And I'm just big on connecting first, and you can do the teaching after. Like, we got to connect with our kids first to know who our kids are, what they're going through, know who our parents are, what they're going through, know who our coworkers are and what they're going through, because then you can create a culture that really, like, lives the culture. Like, is it I was big on like, I want our culture to feel it's like a mom and pop shop. It's how I visit. Like, you can go to a big, massive school district and it feels like a corporation because ultimately, like, it kind of is a corporation. It's a lot of moving wheels and a lot of moving pieces in it. But I wanted ours to feel like a boutique. Like, you can go shop at Target or you can go shop at the boutique. And I want our parents to come in, know their kids are going to be loved. Our kids show up. We did a report or a survey with our parents this last year, and it was very interesting because out of all of our parents, 91% said they would refer another parent to our school. So it was 9% that wouldn't. But the interesting part was even out of those, 100% said their kids feel safe at school. And I can live with that because 9% of them wouldn't refer another parent. But they also said their kids feel safe at school. And ultimately, that's more important. Do your kids feel safe when they go to school? Do your teachers feel safe when they come to school? Like, if we can't create an environment where our staff and students feel safe and cared for, how can we expect them to do anything else? So that was just really my big focus. And our school went from 1 star to 4 star. We just moved and remodeled a new building. It was a vacant school building. We bought it, remodeled it. So we've been there. It's our second year there. So now we're kind of rebuilding our population because we moved to a different neighborhood. Man, but I love it. I love showing up. There's kids that are in 8th grade right now that I've been there long enough where I remember when their parent was pregnant with them. So it's I have kids that I taught that have kids there now. So it's a blessing just to be a part of something that's so much bigger than who I am. Like it's about the families, the community. And you see that kids that went there felt so good about it that they bring their kids back. It's like that's why I show up and do what I do every day.
That's amazing. So talk to us. I know restorative practices are, it's a lot of people do know about it, but maybe some aren't as familiar with restorative practices. And you talked about the connection being there before education. Somebody might say, well, this sounds, what? Wait a minute, what are you talking about? This will that re- is that really what you did it? Like, like it's like there's no way that relationships are that impactful to where 1 star to 4 star. Like tell me a little bit about like the day to day. Like how do you utilize restorative practices when you do have a student that is misbehaving or a student that has gotten expelled or whatever the situation may be. How do you implement that and how do relationships play a role in that restoration process?
Yeah, and I think first is all let me also say, like, I am big on restorative praxis, but we still have suspended and expelled kids. Like, let me just be I'm not a hypocrite to be like, don't suspend, don't expel. But the question I would ask is, will it solve your problem? Now, there's some things a kid brings a weapon to school, like that's an expulsion, 100%. But perfect example, you and I are buddies, we're at recess, we're playing basketball, game's heated, you hit the game winner on me, you yell something at me, I come and push you, now we're fighting. A lot of schools, that's a 3-day automatic suspension. But really, when you look at it, you and I are friends. We fought because we didn't know how to manage our emotions during a heated game. 15 minutes later, we don't even have a problem with each other anymore. The fight is over. We done got our licks in, but now we're going home for 3 days. What did the suspension solve? It didn't solve anything. So the biggest thing for us is really getting people to understand and connect with each other. It's like you and I get in a fight, it'd be a lot easier to talk about, how do we prevent this from happening again? I think that's the aspect that schools miss. Now, please, by all means, if someone's like they should still be suspended, I'm not going to debate that because I am a strong proponent of actions have consequences because if people don't think that the world is going to be it's going to be a cold world once they get out in this real world because you fight one of your coworkers at work, ain't no one sitting down and having a conversation, bro, you're out of there. But I do think as children we and students we have to understand that these kids are learning behaviors. They 7th grade, they don't know how to manage their emotions, so how do we have a better discussion of you know, how do we respond when we lose? How do we respond when we win? Is me going up and pushing my friend the answer when they, make a game winner and yell? It's the things that we want to get our kids to learn. They're still learning. It's not school is not just teaching kids academic, it's teaching them behaviors as well and how to respond and how do they manage their emotions. So really that's the foundational connection piece of what are we doing proactively so we don't have to be reactive to these behaviors. Are teachers at the door when kids are arriving? Are the administrators at the door of the building when kids are walking in? Because there's a lot of behaviors that we can see and prevent before they get to the classroom. A student walks in with a look on their face, you should know that student. Like, Daniel, what's going on, man? Is there anything you want to talk about? Sometimes kids would be like, "Yeah, I do want to talk." And their parent cussed them out on the way to school. Just so the listeners are aware, our school, about 96% of our kids come from economically disadvantaged environments. So there are some neighborhood challenges that our kids come in with. And really knowing, like, what neighborhood do our kids come from? What are their parents present? Are the parents that are present actually present? Like, you have some parents, two parents in the house, but the kids come home and the parents ain't paying them no attention. So I think it's really just knowing and understanding who your students are, who your parents are, who your teachers are, who your coworkers are, that allow to have those meaningful conversations. Because when you treat schools as this black and white environment, a fight means 3 day suspension. It doesn't allow you to operate in that gray zone that schools are in 99% of the time. Like, what Daniel needs is different from what Edward needs. What Edward needs is different from what the next student needs. So really focusing on building those real relationships, not just that those fluffy ones, like really building an understanding of who our kids are, because then ultimately we can meet our kids where they are and we can meet our teachers where they are. And it's all about the culture. And that's why I spend my time in schools. It's like really getting them to focus on the culture. The academic stuff is going to do what it does. But if you don't have a strong culture, you're not going to weather those storms that happen on a day-to-day basis in a school.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're speaking about the relationship piece because I think that's the core element of it all. I think about let's say your own children. Have their children ever messed up and maybe normally the punishment would be this, but there was some lenience or you understood the precursors to whatever that behavior was, and so therefore there's a little bit of understanding that you had as it related to why they did what they did. I think when we have proper or like very connected school environments that strong relationships, then like you understand like what's going on. So therefore, where you say, oh, like you said, the black and white, oh, that's just a 3 day suspension. Um, is that really necessary? But if we can have some type of ownership and accountability and like a mindset that like these are my kids. Like this isn't. I'm not in a building with the community's kids. I'm in that classroom with my kids. I'm in this building with my kids. I like that is the relationship and the connection that we have. Because if they're your kids, then what process would you go through in this moment if they were yours? Would it be any different? That's a question that I often ask, and sometimes it is different because you see at times how parents are with their kids. A mother's love. I just had a conversation when I was back home recently with a cousin of mine, and her son has been in and out of some different things, and she was talking about a mother's love, and I'm like, would that same love be present or that 10, 13, 14, 15 chances if that was somebody else's child? And I feel like it should be equivalent.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because there are some parents that don't know how to love their own kids, and some teachers that, they I didn't understand what love looked like until I was loved the way I needed to be loved. So part of it is understanding what drives your students, what drives the adults in the building, the teachers and the staff, because there's a thing when I talk to our teachers in the beginning of the year and we talk about like the teachers lounge. It's like some people say that treat others the way you want to be treated, but some people want to be mistreated. Some people don't know love. To some people, love looks like someone yelling in their face because that's the only way they've ever been loved. So I think the better thing is treat others how they want to be treated, because how Daniel wants to be treated is different from how I want to be treated. But how do we know if we don't know our kids, if we don't know our staff members? Like, we have to treat others the way they want to be treated, because I was a student, and let's use sports as a perfect example. The coaches that I did and performed the best with on a football field were ones that got on my butt. that were like, "Get down, let's do this," like no wiggle room. But that didn't work for me in a classroom. Like I needed you to give me a little wiggle room, give me some grace, give me some mercy. Like teachers that yelled at me in class, I was going to challenge you back. But a football coach that yelled at me, I needed it there. So it's also knowing that like what works in one environment may not work in another, in another environment for a student. But that's where it's that operating in that gray space. Like it's not black and white. Like yes, there's probably some teachers that were confused because they saw how my football coach treated me, and then they try to treat me that way, and it's like, no, don't talk to me that way. Like that coach had that relationship with me, so he could be tough on me, but it's the tough love. You can't it can't be tough love without first loving your kids. So some teachers are just being tough. That's not going to fly. But knowing that what student A needs is different from what student B. So ultimately finding out what are our kids' love languages, for lack of a better term, like what drives our kids? Is it incentives? Is it praise? Is it just being recognized? Some kids don't need a pizza party. They just want you to hear, Daniel, you did an awesome job. And they want to hear it in front of their peers. Some kids, they want the candy and those incentives, so ultimately finding out the restorative practice is being proactive, really understanding what drives our kids, what drives our teachers, what drives our parents, and then ultimately meeting each of those people where they are versus some uniform like here it is, come get it, because some people are not going to all want that. So that's ultimately, I say, it's we're being proactive so we don't have to react as much. Now it doesn't mean that if you implement restorative practice you're not going to have problems. You're going to still have problems, but how they get resolved changes. And I think that's the part that people miss. It's like, well, we've done the restorative and we still have problems. Like, yeah, it's not a fix all, but it allows you to navigate those problems a lot better because we have a mutual respect and understanding that we're all trying to pull the rope the same direction and accomplish the same thing.
Right. That's good, man. I love it. So with y'all implementing the restorative practices, one of the things that I'm interested in hearing is that um, have you had an Edward story to where the same thing that Miss Davis was for you, you have been for that person, and now they've come back. Maybe they're speakers now, or maybe they're educators now, but it didn't look like it was going to be that way, but you were able to pay it forward. Do you have a story, any stories that resemble that you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so I have a student. He actually just sent me a T-shirt yesterday. Lewis Williams. He was one of the first kids I ever had. At the time, I was teaching gym, and he was a student that like was dangerous in a gym class. Like he was the one back flipping, 10 handsprings, and I'm like Lewis, man, you're gonna hurt yourself. Like without mats, like no more back. I mean, he was like backflip across the entire gym, and he was a kid that you could tell that he was just an incredible kid. He just was like me. He could not sit still. But it's crazy because I look at him now. He travels the country. His name is Blue Lou. He is a softball and basketball referee. He goes all over the country reffing softball tournaments, and he'll like strike a kid out and do a backflip, and he's loved because of the energy the energy he brings as a ump. Like no umps are doing that. They're boring. But it's like I look at him and I'm like, I'm not shocked. He literally just yesterday, I got a package of his T-shirt. He signed it, and I talked to him here and there, and I just see it, and I'm like, man, I'm just proud of the man that he's become because all of the things that used to drive me nuts as a teacher, because I'm like, man, he's gonna end up cracking his skull, and I got to call his parents and but like I look at that's his gift to the world. Like he gets paid to go to these softball events. I see these videos and I'm not even kidding you, lines of 100 kids waiting for his autograph because of like he makes and not that a softball event is boring, but he makes a position of an umpire that tends to be a boring position. He makes it so exciting that these kids want his autograph and take photos with him. And he literally just sent me his t-shirt. I just got a couple days ago. So that's just a perfect example of, a kid that had a lot of behaviors that, at the time they were dangerous. Like, man, he was all over the place. but it's like he's still all over the place. But now that gift, that talent, that skill, he's changing the world as a softball. He was went with the Savannah Bananas. Is that the name of them? The like Harlem Globetrotter baseball. It's like a Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. They're big. They starting to blow up. But he did some events with them, and it was the gift that he had that I could see as an educator, that now the world gets to see him showcase it across the country. And it's just cool to see that. And it's like, man, those are the moments as an educator that you're proud, because he was one of my students, one of my first students. And now his gift, that his gift made room for him, the same way the Bible says that. And now I get to see it, live. And he literally just sent me his t-shirt. So shout out to Lewis Williams. Blue Lou is his umpire name. Has a huge following on TikTok, huge following on YouTube. Incredible kid. Played football in college. Had some challenges outside of that, but ultimately, like, his gift has taken him places that the academic aspect wouldn't take him, because that his gift was his athletic ability, and now the world gets to see it. So I'm super proud of him, Lewis Williams. So that, yeah, Blue Lou.
Louis Williams, Lulu. I'm looking forward to looking them up, man. I literally, once we get off of here, that's what I'm gonna go do. But I think one of the amazing things that you just shared, man, is just that you recognize his gift. I was told, I don't know how many times, you talk too much. How was the? I mean, the stories that you're sharing about Blue Lou, yourself, man, that was I resonate with it, man, because it was so many times where, like, it was just a it was, I mean, let's be honest, it was a boring environment. I wasn't engaged. And so therefore I did stuff that was more engaging, in those environments. It was a teacher without, black families didn't really acknowledge a whole lot of things. One teacher told one time, "You got ADHD." I remember I went home and told my mom that, boy, she was so hot. Like, she was like, she was up there ready to, like, cause like destruction, man, because it was like these things that kind of get, not are not recognized as gifts. Maybe I said this recently. I needed help controlling my gift, but also I needed somebody that recognized it as a gift and didn't just punish it. Because there were many years where I didn't, after football, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, because I didn't know I had any other gift outside of sports. And so, man, I love the fact that you were able to, instill with him that, hey, this is a gift, and there's a room and there's a specific place that gift is needed and is welcome. How can we cultivate the gifts and amplify those gifts more and more? And so, man, I just want to say, man, thank you so much for, your time, and you are doing amazing work. And I can't allow this conversation to go without giving you the opportunity to share about, your family, man, your wife and your son. Tell me a little bit about what is it like being a father. I know you do a lot of amazing things. I know in the education space, but I know that, the joys that you have of being a husband and a father. And so, would you mind sharing a little bit about that for me, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's like when I look at my wife and my son, they're why I go so hard. Like, there's been times where life has kicked my butt. Even looking back to a year and a half ago when we were going through the construction process for our school, like, probably the most stressful time of my life. But it's like I do it for them. Like, everything I do, it's bigger than me. Like, I want, something were to happen to me tomorrow, like, I want my family to have choices and options in life. I don't want it to be, I have to do this, because, like, I don't want them to have to do anything. It's like, I want, when my son gets older, I want him to do what he wants to do in this world, and know that there's options out there. You don't have to go to school because that's the only way out of poverty. Or, for me, I had to get a scholarship. My parents couldn't afford for me to go to college. Like, if I didn't get a scholarship, I had big schools that wanted me to walk on, and I'm like, bro, I can't pay 40 grand to go to school. I have to get a scholarship to get the education I need to ultimately get me where I'm going. But everything I do is for them. Like, I want, them to have options and choice. My wife is an entrepreneur herself, has a beautiful nail salon, super proud of her. It's been open for under a year, but it's there's challenges of being an entrepreneur. Like, I've went through it, through other businesses myself. So I just love, those are the titles that I love more than anything. Because ultimately one day I'm not going to be the executive director of a school. but I'm always going to be a husband. I'm always going to be a father. I'm always going to be a brother. I'm always going to be an uncle. Like those are titles that will never get taken away from me. Like you're always going to be that. Like one day I won't be an executive director, but one thing I know I got to be is I got to be the best husband, the best dad that I can be, because ultimately that's what's more important. Like you could strip down all the business awards. Like I'm still going to be a husband. I'm still going to be a father. Like, do they look at me as someone they can be proud of the same way people in the community do? Like, oh, he's won awards as an executive director. Well, like I would much rather win awards as a husband and awards as a father. So that's where I'm really striving to do the majority of my growth now, is just making sure that when it's all said and done, like they look at me and are as proud of me as all my teachers and everyone else is in the world that sees these other accomplishments. Like I need them to be as equally proud of me.
That's good, man. That's good. And I know they are, because you don't go as hard as you do, and for that not to be seen, and for that not to be felt. So, man, continue to do amazing work, man. And I'm so proud of the work that you're doing as a husband, as a father, and also the work that you're doing in the school and the community as well. And so, man, we're getting down to the end of this podcast, and so we end every session with this segment called "Better Days Ahead," and it's just an opportunity to encourage. If you have a mantra, any type of quotes or anything like that that you use to utilize to know that there's better days ahead for yourself, we use this opportunity to share it with our audience. And so, what do you got for us?
Yeah, the question that I always ask at the end of when I talk to educators or students is, do you believe? There's a saying that your words become your actions become your habits become your character, and your character will ultimately determine your destiny. And do you believe? Because if you don't believe, why should anyone else? But what I learned is when I didn't believe, I had people that believed in me, the Mrs. Davises, the Dr. Means, the Dr. Mosers. Like when I didn't believe in myself, I had a community of people that believed and saw the best in me, which ultimately helped instill that belief in myself. But it all starts with your mindset. Like if you don't believe you can, then you probably won't. But if you don't believe, then you better surround yourself with a group of people who do believe, because they will rub off on you. And eventually, once you believe, man, the world is yours. If you don't believe your students can be successful, you're going to treat them that way. Miss Davis saw a fire in me that I didn't know. I thought my fire was, because I only saw it be destructive, but she believed that my fire could be productive. And from there, I still got the same fire. It's just like you shared. Now it's harnessed, and I know how to use it to be constructive. So, the question I would just ask someone to reflect on is, do you believe? Because ultimately, what you believe is what you will become. And if you believe you can be something great, you'll be something great. If you don't, yeah, you probably won't. But if you don't, you better surround yourself with people who do believe in you. Some family, some friends, some coworkers, some leadership, some mentors. Like every person in this world deserves to believe whatever they believe in. Like you have to believe that there's greater days ahead. Because if you don't, you're going to continue to stay in whatever situations and circumstances that you're currently stuck in if you don't believe you'll get out of them. So belief and mindset is more important than anything else.
And mindset. Do you believe? So we end with the same encouragement that we just received from Edward, and that is, do you believe? And if you are having some challenges right now, then get into a space to where you can borrow belief, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a friend. But you got to make sure that you have a mindset to where you believe that it's possible for you. Edward, I thank you so much for your time. This is another episode of the Mindset on Resilience podcast. Until next time.